In our industry, I feel like everything is an under-recognized challenge.
For 50, 60 years, mental health was, sort of pushed down, swept under the rug.
Creating, constantly being creative is so much on an individual.
Our community is nomadic and they're moving, and it's really hard to have consistent care if you have to have a clinician who is licensed in the area where you live, but you don't really live there.
We also see a lot of folks still contributing to the stigma. It can be really hard to feel like I can speak up about my mental health and maintain my job.
One of the biggest things is building a preventative model into the daily work that we do.
And a real focused effort around trying to help mitigate those risks and problems and the things that come from that.
I think it's just giving people the confidence that this human's life matters, and maybe that conversation will save them from a crisis situation.
The willingness to be vulnerable as a culture and to look each other in the eye as humans and not just as whatever our role is in the industry.
We could do a lot of good by talking about it and being really open about that's at all levels of work.
There's no reason to do any of this alone. We're here to serve.
Awesome. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody starts trickling in. I'm Shelley Hargis with BBR Music Group and also the chair of the Agenda Committee. Welcome to day 2. We just have a couple of announcements. We know it's cold outside, but don't miss Team UNG at the Ryman lunch today. So with it being cold, there will be shuttles and golf carts outside of the 5th Avenue entrance by Bongo Java and Bob's, and they will be running continuously. So make sure you hop on those so you can get back and forth. And also make plans to attend Acoustic Alley beginning at 6:30 tonight, and it will be right here in DG Ballrooms featuring Rhett Akins, Tyler Hubbard, and Old Dominion, so don't miss it. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck and the crew, so come on out.
Thank you, Shelley. All right. What is mainstream country? I'm not going to introduce everybody. Names are up there. Check the app. You can get bios. We're going to jump right in. Brian, what song that doesn't fit the mainstream stereotype worked best for KYGO Denver in the last couple of years, and what are the metrics that proved it?
Well, there's 2 of them. Zach Bryan has both of them. Something in the Orange, I Remember Everything. The metrics, without getting too far into our proprietary data, but I could tell you, I could play that song, or both of those, I could play them in power rotation today, and they're just massive and call out week after week after week. And that was following, I don't know, what was it, 1 trillion streams on, the streams on Spotify forever. So every metric pointed to it being just a massive, massive hit.
Fantastic. Rachel, is there a song that was behind the discovery curve for Spotify in terms of mainstream country listening that you saw sort of catch up in a big way later on?
Yeah, the most recent example we had of this was Max McNown's A Lot More Free. This was a song that really trended with us a while back, and he was signed and came back through a label and with a great marketing plan, and now we're seeing a lot of mainstream success with that song, and it's doing great on Hot Country.
Very good. And we just talked about this. I can't remember, Jeff or Keith. Tyler Childers, In Your Love. What is the worst reason you heard for not playing that song?
The craziest response to us was the video was a love story between 2 men. And we literally there were 2 programmers that said, I can't play this. My listeners don't want to hear this. And I was like, new to the country world, I was just like, well, why? How is that possible? It's a video.
Right.
And it's like, no, I can't play this. My audience doesn't want to hear this.
And then what was the best, most logical reason you heard for not playing?
I think mine was something kind of similar, where the program director believed in the song, thought the song was a hit, but said, he can't be there at the beginning of it because he didn't want to go against the country rules.
Okay. So Adam, you promote a few concerts. How many radio programmers in this room have taken the time to get to know you?
In this room, probably none because they're all hungover right now. But I'd say my close relationship, I'd say a handful throughout the country.
And you're an accessible guy.
I think so.
Okay.
I like to be.
Yeah. Speaking of that, we're sort of curious. We were talking, I don't know if we're going to be able to see with these lights, but we're sort of curious, like, who in this room is on the creative side, like, and who's on the exposure programming, you know, that side. So raise your hand if you're sort of more on the creative artist side of the business. And then if you're on the radio side, more exposure, playlisting. Okay, looks half and half to me. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna hit some definitions and parameters. So Adam, when we're talking about what mainstream country is, are we talking about the sound, the instrumentation, the voice, the production, or the audience?
I mean, I think today we're talking about the audience. We're talking authenticity. I think relatability has been, I mean, look, for when I'm looking at who our audience is for concerts, it's younger than our country radio listener. But yeah, I think it is that today it's a little bit more of the Americana leading, rock leaning, authentic sound is really what it is.
So Brian, are we talking about, obviously there are a lot of people who want to break into country music but haven't proven themselves in any place yet. Are we talking about the unproven artists today, or are we going to focus more on artists who have some metrics in some places that maybe radio and playlisters could pay more attention to?
Well, there's a couple of ways around that. The first thing is actually listen to music and listen to it on some good speakers, for crying out loud. Like, stop listening to little earbuds all the time and actually kind of get to know what these artists are about. But I think you have some incredible resources, and I think a lot of radio makes this mistake of they treat Spotify like an adversary, and it's, you know, again, without getting too far into our own proprietary data, the two are not at odds with each other. You actually can learn a lot from Spotify, and here's the thing, they have the luxury of exposing thousands and thousands of songs which you never have the real estate for on a radio station. So think of it as an opportunity rather than your enemy. And I can tell you in the data, you know, that we've seen is that the listener likes both Spotify and radio, but for very different reasons. And you'll actually see where, you know, we kind of had this thing where it's like, oh, if they're streaming, they're disenfranchised with radio. And I can tell you that's not the case. The biggest problem that radio has, it has a marketing issue where it's in the fringes, it's not top of mind awareness anymore, but that's not because of what Spotify is doing. So I would say use that as an opportunity. Look at that data, look at those streams. There are a ton of resources, and we've talked about it, from local data in most cities in America that you can look and see kind of what is catching fire.
Very good. So Rachel, in the description of the panel, we talk about Zach Bryan and Tyler Childers, but are there other artists beyond that who sort of fit the profile of having data but not seeing mainstream adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about kind of two different things. One is like, what is country music, and one is like mainstream, like commercial success of country music, right? And when I think about like what is country music, right? This is a kind of an eternal question that I think people have been trying to answer from, you know, the 20s and 30s on. To me, it's a celebration of rural culture and all of the kind of highs and lows that come along with that, which creates a big tent, right? And then you have like the sound of the music that's successful. So when you start with, you know, I think about like what Willie Nelson did with his like kind of mainstream success in more of a Nashville sound, and then kind of transitioning to outlaw country. I feel like we're seeing that transition right now. We had a ton of incredible successful artists with a more pop sound, and now we're seeing the Zach Bryan, Tyler Childers, Sierra Farrell coming in with this more rootsy kind of bluegrass inspired Americana sound that's becoming very popular with our younger audience. And the way that we've responded to that is we are creating spaces on Spotify, which is, just a benefit of the streaming space to serve these different audiences as these sounds grow. So Homegrown is a playlist that we launched a couple years ago to really capture this sound, to see how those songs did as the sound got more popular and then started moving those songs into our more mainstream country spaces. So yes, some of those songs have been extremely successful. And we've seen them live a long life on Hot Country, which is our biggest mainstream country space.
I'm going to jump ahead here, but maybe talk about that process where you sort of filter music through playlists as you see adoption and interest from the different audiences for those playlists.
Yeah, so it kind of comes in two different directions. One is more of like a sonic experience. So we might go with a wild country or a pop country or a homegrown for the sound of a song that's very new and kind of untested. And then another is like the recency of the artist just coming onto the scene. So then we have our Fresh Finds program, which is completely devoted to independent artists. We have a playlist called Next from Nashville. New Boots is our kind of more familiar trending new songs from relatively new artists. And those two kind of streams come together to help us find the best songs that we can for our biggest spaces.
Great. So we do want to talk about the big tent and this as a broad view of maybe helping us all get a sense for how we figure out what's fitting with the audience and what isn't. But we do want to talk about Zach and Tyler. Tyler, In Your Love peaked, I guess, in the 30s. What did you guys experience and see as you were working with that? And what were the things that you were looking at and thinking, Tyler's ready for the mainstream audience and the mainstream audience is ready for him?
Well, I was just saying, I went to see Tyler at Radio City Music Hall in Manhattan, and it wasn't being worked yet. And I'm in Midtown Manhattan, and there's 6,000 people in cowboy boots and cowboy hats in Manhattan, and I'm like, what's going on here? Like, it was like I was in another world. And I'm watching the show, and I hit Jeff, and I'm like, how do you feel about working this record to country radio? Now, we are in the pop world. We knew nothing about country radio.
And he means nothing. Nothing.
But, and to our credit, I'll give us a pat on the back. We went to programmers and said, we know nothing. Let me hear about this format. Talk to us about it, right? And it was there was just something there, and then you watch Tyler go to Madison Square Garden and then just bigger and bigger venues, and the song streamed 200 million in the US, and we're like, let's just go.
I'll also say what Keith was mentioning. There was an interesting conversation yesterday as we're walking through the hall. A program director pulled me off to the side and said, well, I told you I was right. And I go, you were right about what? He goes, that Tyler Childers song, that wasn't a hit. It peaked in the 30s. I was like, well, I don't know how you could say it wasn't.
Whose fault was that?
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know how you could say it wasn't a hit. When I got a 16-year-old daughter and her and all her friends are going to these shows,
he sold a lot of tickets.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think you could just look at a chart position when you got two pop guys that are kind of going against the grain and trying to.
With an artist that really doesn't do anything.
Yeah, doesn't
we got
need
one
people,
liner.
But this is not a new problem, right? I got into a conversation with someone about how Chris Stapleton's Tennessee Whiskey wasn't a hit because it didn't hit number one.
Yeah, which is crazy.
The idea that a chart position dictates whether or not something is a big hit is just not true.
Yeah.
And never has been.
But Keith, you mentioned attendance at a Tyler Childers show, but I want to go back to Zach Bryan, who sold out 2 nights in Denver, and Adam knows the tour well, and it's like, that's 120,000 tickets sold in 5 minutes, and I just want to put this in perspective. And by the way, Zach Bryan just sold out Michigan, the largest stadium in North America.
And like 3 or 4 nights at MetLife Stadium when the Giants play.
But to put that in perspective, 120,000 tickets in 5 minutes. That's the daily cume of a top 20 market radio station. In fact, it's the weekly cume of a station like this size of Nashville. You can see 150 to 190,000 cumes Zach Bryan sells that in 5 minutes. So let's put that in real perspective. Are we creating a narrative about what mainstream country is, or should we let the audience weigh in on what
Well, wouldn't that be
country is?
considered almost like, when you're looking at your research, passion scores? People are spending their hard-earned money. These tickets are $200 plus.
Well, let's talk about tickets for a minute, Adam, because we think about, they're selling all these hard tickets, and we go in the concert, and we look around the room and go, are these our listeners or are they not? What do you see on the data side? You guys have access to a lot of data.
Yeah, we obviously a lot of what we hold, something that really no stakeholder does in the artist business, is we actually have hard ticket data to who is buying the tickets. And we spend probably more money and more time following the trail of that specific customer and what they're buying. And we're looking at artists like Luke Combs, and their audience is buying Hudson Westbrook and Ty Myers and Red Clay Strays and whatever else, things that are really not on our radar at the moment. But I'm like, but they are discovering every day and buying tickets every day for these artists that we are not even embracing in any capacity. And then when you go look at a Hudson Westbrook or a Ty Myers, and they're selling 4,000 or 5,000 tickets across the country.
Are you able to see, though, I don't want to pick on any artists or anything, but people who are buying tickets to mainstream country shows, and then they're slowly adopting some of these younger, different sounding artists, or?
Well, I think what we would consider a mainstream country fan is also a fan of SZA or a fan of Justin Bieber or a fan of, they're fans of all different kinds of music, and they're discovering, thanks to the channels, they're discovering different genres and different music every day. Music to a degree is genreless at this point. And at least that's what the younger demographic is telling us.
But we're not going to put SZA on Hot Country.
Not yet.
It depends on what kind of music.
We may have a remake coming.
No, but hey, I would say you should be aware of what is out there, because if you're programming a radio station, if our songs don't measure up, they will leave for something better. I make it a point to, and I was telling Rachel earlier, I listen to New Music Friday on Spotify every week because I want to know, how do our songs match up? And I remember going back to last March, and a few people said, I think the word was rogue, and I was crazy for playing Shabuzi and what was the, Dasha. Dasha and Shabuzi, and those turned out to be pretty good picks. But at that time in March, I remember in New Music Friday, I was like, wow, this Sabrina Carpenter record is really good. See, that's the reality, right? The music fan is genre agnostic. Yes, they have an expectation of your country radio station. However, if you're just playing the best thing that a label hands you, sometimes the label priority and the audience priority is not the same thing, and that you have to understand. So I would recommend find out everything that is out there. Find out the best songs, because if you do target a 38-year-old female on your country station, or a 45-year-old female, and you're playing a nothing burger, and then Sabrina Carpenter drops espresso, I can tell you where that female is going.
So Jeff, you mentioned, Tyler didn't really do much, or maybe Keith did. And there is this sort of notion in country music, like we don't really gravitate to an artist who's doing a drive-by. Like there's this sense of, we want you to be part of the community and all that, which sometimes leads itself to people abusing that with the sort of this kiss the ring notion. What was your experience with that, and how important is it for country to, we've got lots of young artists who are in it every day, clawing and scraping. Should we give a playlist spot to someone like Tyler?
I think when you, certain artists, yes, but I think when a programmer hears, oh, our artist is not doing anything, it means that they don't care. They care. Like Tyler, I've met the guy once for 2 minutes. The chairman of my company met. Like, it's not because he doesn't care. He actually, out of his pocket, all the plaques that we took last year, the pictures with, that was all out of Tyler's pocket. He was very grateful of the airplay. And, it's just, he's a quirky guy. He didn't, he wasn't going to be doing the handshakes and, kissing the babies and all that stuff. That's just, he's an artist and he just wants to perform, but he cares. And I think some of these programmers just thought, oh, he's not going to come by the station? No, well, screw that. I'll move on.
Well, I also think, too, when you look at big picture, like, oh, Tyler and Zach, they're not doing anything for radio. Well, that's where I would disagree. I think they're doing a lot for radio. First off, everyone complains about revenue being down. Do you not want the ad buys from these shows that are coming in? I mean, it's good money coming in. You don't want to walk and tell your sales manager, we don't want that money. I think the other thing is too, they're giving radio an opportunity to grab an audience that has been either underserved or forgotten about. And that's how we grow our listenership, and, not just for the moment now, but in 5 years from now. Like, everyone could be like, well, our demo is 2534 or whatever. Well, that's great, but in 5 years, when that demo runs out, do you think all of a sudden these people that you haven't been programming to, these younger kids, you think all of a sudden they're just going to say, "Wow, I want to listen to radio today"? It's not going to happen.
And even with the rev share, like you're saying, I mean, Tyler's camp come to us every tour. We're going to be in this city. What radio stations do you want us to go out to make sure that they're being taken care of?
And I'll say on our side, I mean, this from our from our Denver regional office, like, we don't bring a show to the market without having a conversation of your thoughts. Is this your fan base? Is this, and how do we collectively work together to grow that artist? And while that might not be a station meet and greet or a radio room or whatever it is, there's a different lens to that relationship, and we are, as a promoter, working on behalf of the artist, right? That's at the end of the day, and I'm an extension of Tyler or Zach or whatever it is that we're working at the time.
Yeah, I think the idea, though, of selecting music for your radio station on any reason other than the audience preference levels is a foreign idea to me. Whether they kiss the ring or not, who cares? I heard anecdotally that somebody dropped a Post Malone record because he didn't do a radio room. I'm like, that's the most absurd thing. So is it about the audience, or is it about egos and other things that really don't matter? So to me, I just focus on the audience. What do they want?
I was just going to say on the streaming side, Spotify as a company has invested a lot in democratizing this process. And, I've been in Nashville for 20 years. I've been coming to CRS almost every one of those years. I love this community and I love country music, but I don't need a new artist, or even an established one to be a part of that, to be part of our music programming. And certainly my team supports music that they find through every avenue, regardless of whether or not they've met someone or got an email about something. Our pitch tool allows us to see music from anyone who distributes music to Spotify. So it's really, really important to us that that's actually not a component of how a song moves through our system.
And I have had conversations with programmers who've said, one programmer said to me, we played Zach Bryan a lot and in daylight, and it didn't perform well in testing.
Wait, what is a lot? Define that. Is that 20 times a week? Is that 30 times a week? And here's the problem with that. And so radio, if anyone looks at the actual data, I know we all hate Nielsen, but there is some behavioral things that we can learn there. The very top radio stations in the country format, their P1s, your most passionate fans, average 2.3 days per week. So let's say you played it 20 times a week. I'm going to dare say 10 of those are probably overnight spins. And then we take the 2.3 days per week, by the way, and go, how many times did they really hear it?
Well, and I want to real quick jump back to what Jeff said about the audience and the next generation of listeners. Did you find with the success you've had with Zach that it brought in listeners, and were they sticky?
Well, it's tough to try to pinpoint it to one song. I mean, we did have a pretty banner year last year in ratings. I mean, I think we cracked the 7-share mark 8 times. The Cume increase. So I like both of those. But is it one artist, or is it just our approach?
Right. Okay.
Well, I think that's also the interesting. Like, people are like, well, you go to a Zach show or a Tyler show, they don't listen to radio. So you just throw up your hands and be like, well, it's not going to happen. But when you have 20,000 people, sometimes bigger, at these shows, isn't that where we get creative and be like, how do we get 1% to come over and listen to radio. If you can get 1,000 new listeners, I mean, Brian, you can touch on that. That's massive.
I think one of the issues that radio faces, and radio, I'm gonna go back, radio does have a Nielsen problem, right? The medium, and this isn't how we approach KYGO, our organization wants us to have the most positive impact we possibly can across the entire demographic, the entire spread in the market, right? But so many radio stations have targeted 45 to 54-year-olds for the entirety of PPM because everyone says, oh, that's who uses radio the most. Well, if we've been targeting 45 to 54-year-olds for the last 15 years, somebody tell me how old those people are right now. Like, we've got to get back to being a six to death. And by the way, the rising tide raises all ships. If you actually have a positive impact and have a meaningful brand in your community, you'll be surprised what you can do with audience and how much it will grow.
And you know, and when we're talking about this, right, it's not saying revamp your whole playlist and just play these artists, but how do you ignore certain artists? How do you ignore Zach? How do you ignore Tyler when they're selling 20, 30, 50,000 tickets a night in your backyard? It's touch it.
Right. We're gonna have a moment. Oh, go ahead.
So one quick question, and this is going to be a complete naive question. When you talk about testing, you're talking about current radio listener. You're talking about current country radio listener, not future potential, all of that. So I think that's the other part is like when you're saying that, to your point, if 1% of the 120,000 people in Denver that bought a ticket to Zach Bryan would now flip over and come to radio, that's a win, right?
Right.
So we don't know that they want to hear this or not because we're not actually looking and reaching out to them to understand that. We're relying on data of who our current listener is, and we all know that current listener is slowly going away.
Right, right. We are going to have time for questions at the end, so if you have questions, hopefully that's up on the screen, or you can use the app. But before we get there, so we've heard it a little bit here this week. I call it the Lumineers country sound, right? Like where, and I'm going to start with you, Rachel, because you see it. What are audiences warming to? What sounds are coming in, and as younger demos are coming into country, bringing with them in terms of openness and acceptance for?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just seeing this across the spectrum. I mean, it's everything from very rootsy bluegrass to including Sabrina Carpenter, Slim Pickens, right? I mean, all the way to Shabuzi, and these like almost like dance country. Although his new song, Good News, is crushing it for us. He and Dasha, by the way. I mean, I think we're seeing also artists that had these massive hits that are coming back with great new songs that are really performing well. What was your question?
Just wondering about the sound. I had a programmer say to me, when FGL broke out, it was one of the most different sounding things out there.
Yeah.
Now it's one of the most country sounding things I play.
Yeah,
it's
so
interesting to think.
It is interesting, right? And I think one of the ways that we've been able to address that is that, like I was talking about earlier, I mean, Claire Heineken on my team has done an incredible job of really like making space for different sounds in their own lanes, and then creating and working to create paths for those into more mainstream popular spaces, and we can get really targeted with that. So like, Indigo leans more Americana, Homegrown is really kind of pointed to our younger listeners. We've got playlists that really focus on more like kind of pop dance songs, and I would just say like, this is free market research for anyone who wants to look at it. Like if you're seeing a song in one of those playlists, you should know that it had to perform well to get there. And then if it moves into a mainstream space from there, like it should be a pretty safe bet. I mean, everyone needs to make their own decision for their own audience, but it's coming from all directions. People are exploring it in a million ways. I mean, from Marshmello to Tyler or some of these more rootsy artists. So.
Well, and the Kane Brown Marshmello song was a #1 country hit with a very different sound.
I mean, I'll never forget. Kane was in Chicago, and they played me this song, and right away I called Keith. I go, "You're never gonna believe this. This record's a fucking home run." And it was. And they were actually gonna go with a different single, a country, and we were gonna have 2 different singles, pop and country, and then obviously they went with Miles and country, and RCA Nashville did an unbelievable job. There were people that were nervous on the Marshmello Kane Brown record. They're like, "Oh, Marshmello's on it. too dancey.
And this is Kane Brown. I mean, Kane Brown. The guy is. How many #1 records at country radio?
He's done everything.
But because Marshmello
I was going to make a joke about
it.
how it was bigger than Tennessee whiskey.
Yeah.
But because Marshmello's on it, it was.
Hey, is Marshmello going to do a radio room and wear the hat?
But you can't tell me, like, when you hear that record, it's not like ear candy and stuck in your head. So I was like, there was, and this isn't just about country either, by the way. We go through the same thing at pop.
Yeah.
You know, we had stations that were giving us a hard time playing Kane Brown, like, oh.
I can't play Kane and Morgan Wallen and Shabuzi at the same time. It's like.
I had a station say.
It was unbelievable.
On the West Coast, I'll leave it at that, at pop. It says, I can't play Morgan Wallen. My listeners do not like Morgan Wallen. I said, have you ever done the eye test? I said, whoa, what's the eye test? They go to the concert. Why would I go to a Morgan Wallen concert? I go, just look at the audience. He went there for 10 minutes with me, and I said, look at this. And Morgan Wallen, not my artist. I said, just look at this audience. What do you think? He goes, oh yeah, these are a lot of my audience.
I gotta give a lot of credit. Talia Cranes, who's here this week and is on a couple panels, is our pop programmer for North America, and she's had great success. I mean, with artists that I wouldn't have even pitched to her, with Zach Top, and I'm gonna blank on some others, but there is some real crossover potential right now.
Yeah, and it's like we were saying, you know, whether on the pop side, right? Touch it. How are you not playing Morgan Wallen?
Well, I want to get into sort of what metrics we can look at, what things, strategies, tactics, that kind of thing. But also, we've got the research panel coming up after this. My understanding is they did some research on this topic, just in terms of sort of audience feelings about different artists. Is Lee in the room? You want to give us some hop up here, and I'm just going to pull you right out of the audience and give us some background on what you saw in research relative to what is mainstream for the country audience.
Yeah, and I'm going to take that question, and I'm going to say the fact of the matter was we were prepared to kind of do a brief flyover of these. It was a 400 title music test with country fans. And then we broke out 50 of them at the direction of the research committee for CRS, which were hot country songs in streaming, to see how they'd perform in terms of popularity and familiarity. And additionally, we said, is this country? Thumbs up, thumbs down. That's simple. Not does it fit, how do you feel, just is it not? And frankly, the results are complex enough that we decided we would be damn fools to try to get it in part of a 45-minute presentation. And I would be a damn idiot to say, and I can summarize it for you in about 8 sentences. Here you go. So it's going to be a CRS 360. In broad terms, it says exactly what's been said here. It says that streaming is an amazing source. It's free research. It should give you an idea of what's coming up, what's hot, what's getting mass appeal within an audience, but you've still got to make decisions to program one stream. You know, it's not 3, you can't change to a different playlist, it's 1. You've got one choice at that point, which is not to skip ahead, it's to tune out. And Brian doesn't like that. So that's the problem.
Very good, very good. That's great. Thank you, Lee. That's very helpful. So let's talk about data. Let's talk about how we figure out where our audience might want to go. You know, to your point, people don't know whether they like what they haven't heard, or they may be hearing it other places and would be pleasantly surprised or not to hear it on your station.
True. But I would say, with all the streaming services, you do have a little more insight now to find the propensity for an audience to gravitate towards a song, and it kind of allows you to be a wild card at times. And I think those of you who know me know I have a bit of a contrarian streak. No. You hush. But I would challenge all of you to, you know, sometimes if you just take conventional wisdom constantly, you create narratives and biases in your own head, and you'll bore the audience to death, by the way. And so be a contrarian at times, step outside of what you think is the comfort zone, and that's the beauty of the streaming data. I mean, Spotify publishes local pulse data. You can see what's over-indexing in a market. So if you're maybe in a smaller market where they don't show local pulse, you can find a city very close to you, and I would dare say it's not going to be some anomaly where it's going to be so different from, say, like Fort Wayne to Indianapolis, for example.
Where do you find that data, Brian? Where do you find that data?
You can, as long as you have a Spotify login, it's you can look at Spotify's charts, and they publish both a top 100 for cities and a local pulse chart. The other thing I would say is look at the top 50. Apple does publish the Shazam data now for most cities, and you can see, and the cool thing with Shazam is you'll see the top call-out records are always in there first. Because if they're on a streaming service, they know what the title and artists are typically, because it displays that right on your device or on your phone. But the Shazam data, that's really showing you, like radio and places that are being exposed to it, they want to know about it. And yeah, newsflash, Post Malone, I Had Some Help is still in the top 5 almost in every city, so keep playing it. And same as Shabuzi, a bar song. I know you're all tired of it, but people still love the song. But you can find all these data points, and it can help you, validate some of your gut, or it can help you be the contrarian I'm talking about. So
we had someone last night we were talking about ticket sales, and they're like, what? And it was, well, how do you know how many tickets are sold? And it's like, well, we have a connect with AEG. How do you not speak to your AEG, the promoter? Like, that's right there. It's at your fingertips.
I talk with, I make no bones about it. AEG is our best partner in Denver. I talk to them probably daily.
You told me that last week, that I was your best partner.
Well, it's,
I pay him.
That's until you wanted that ad on my AC station. No, just kidding. But yeah, it's like, have a relationship with these guys, and you can help them too just as much as they can help you with data. And that's the cool thing, is we talk about what we're going to do with shows and what it can be for both of us. So,
how do we also think, when we're talking about metrics and data, it's total market consumption. There's a service, I believe most people use it, Luminate, where you can pull up, the top 100, 200 streaming in your market. If you don't have that, talk to one of your, people you're close with on the record side. I can't tell you how many markets I send that are the top 100, 200 streaming locally in that market. It's such a great tool too. And, I think when you kind of are looking at other radio stations that you respect, they do research, it's similar. Pull up their market. Oh, wow, they're playing that song. I'm not playing that. Let's see how it's reacting comparatively. And it works.
How do I get ticketing data?
I don't know it's so much ticketing data. I think a lot of, the eye test is a big thing, right? And I will say, I started a very early career, had a brief stint in radio, went to Warner for 5 seconds, and I've been in live for 20 years. And part of that was I loved to watch the emotional reaction that live music has with a fan. And the eye test is really everything. To go to the kind of the crux of this panel of Zach Bryan, I'll never forget going to the Ryman and seeing Zach Bryan and watching 4 guys in the last row with their arms around each other singing along. And I was like, there is no stopping this.
That audience was nuts.
It was nuts. And it was there is no stopping this, and this will be the biggest thing in the world because of that. And so I think, the relationship, I would say this, I spend most of my days at shows, most of my nights at shows that we work at shows that we don't work with. You can see it. And I think it's knowing, me exists in every market throughout the world, right? You mentioned your relationship with the Denver office. When I was in New Jersey for 10 years, and I would say Mike Ryan at KMK was my best friend. Anything that I was considering booking, we had a conversation first of, are you playing this? Do your listeners know this? What is our relationship going to be like on the show? You need to come to the show. You need to see it and feel it. And we built a business off of that in New Jersey. And I think you have that in Denver. And so I think that's where you get the data. It's just conversation and understanding who the audience is and seeing it.
Well, I will say too, though, I know, it's easy sometimes for us to say, the eye test, which I think is not just for radio, for everything. But with consolidation and less bodies, I mean, you could be at 5 shows a night sometimes in these markets. Radio can't be everywhere, but like, again, we were talking about like, I don't hear every record, but I've got a daughter, I've got a son, they've got friends. So it's like, I'm constantly communicating and talking like, what are you listening to? Why? Where are you going this weekend? Oh, what did you think of that show? And that's what I'm getting off of.
Most of the new music that I am discovering is from my 13-year-old.
100%.
That is, she is listening to having more discovery every day through streaming than I can ever consume. And she's saying to me like, oh, can we go see this band? Or have you heard of this artist? Or are you working with this artist?
The question of the audience, though, let me jump in real quick, because we asked what the mainstream country audience is, and do we go into the stadium in Denver at the Zach Bryan show and look around and say, is this the mainstream country audience? But what about, someone said to me, different media means different things to people. So I am a different audience when I'm buying a concert ticket than I am when I'm driving into work with the radio on, than I am when I'm digging through Spotify looking for songs, right? Is there a place for music that is not necessarily reactive to the point of ticket sales or adding or thumbs up or whatever, where, especially on an established artist, do I want to keep that on my radio station because it's comfortable, it's not a tune-out moment? How do you balance that, Brian?
Boy, that's a lot to unpack there.
Well, wouldn't it be like classic country? It's like, when you look at like radio, you have the mainstream ACs that like don't add anything new, and it's.
I'm gonna give this my best shot to try to get through all of this really quick. So go back to one of the earlier comments about the 45-54. We've kind of created this self-fulfilling prophecy in radio, and that's why we're starting to see some dwindling audiences as well. It's not just, yes, there's sample issues. We're being attacked from all sides with a lot of different media, if you will, and different things you can do. So I think some of your question lends itself to like legacy artists, right? And why we play those. I think that's what you're trying to say, and maybe that is comfort food, but the reality is that if the legacy artist puts out a new song and it's not the best song, again, I go back to, that's not the audience's problem, right? Like, are we creating narratives at this format? And I'll tell you, because I did have a programmer once tell me, we were talking about Zach Bryan, and they said, oh, that Zach Bryan's a TSL killer, isn't it? And I said, is it? Oh, yeah, it's a TSL killer. And I go, well, how did you come up with that? And, you're scheduling a music log in some places that don't even have ratings, don't have research, and so what is the data that qualifies that? So my point is somebody high up in one of these companies is telling you that. Like, somebody is creating that narrative, and that's where I go back to. So I don't know if it's a balance issue. I just want all the best songs all the time.
Okay. We're going to go to questions here in just a second. We want to have a takeaway for you in the app. We don't, because you can't pour coffee into an app. So Keith and Jeff were kind enough to bring some takeaways that are at the back of the room if anyone wants to grab them on their way out. Questions?
Yes, we've got a few. Me too. So one of them from someone in Connecticut says, if there is plenty of data that shows the diversity of sound and artist is growing, what are still the biggest obstacles at radio to let open the gates?
Say that again?
If there is plenty of data that shows the diversity of sound and artist is growing, what are still the biggest obstacles at radio to let open the gates?
Gatekeepers.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. There's a system here in Nashville, and it feels like a lot of gatekeepers.
I want to answer this oddly, I think. I don't think anybody gets into radio because they don't love music, right? Yeah. And I have a lot of empathy for everyone who has to address cum and numbers for advertisers, right? That's not something that we are directly reporting on at Spotify. We have a lot of spaces that we can create for those things. And so you end up maybe having to be a little more risk averse than even you want to. And I would just say, like, I want everyone in this room to know a couple of things. One is that, like, you can trust that if something is in hot country, it is performing well with the mainstream country audience, and then use your own judgment about whether or not it matters to your audience. The other thing that I just don't want to walk away from this panel without saying is that we have increased the number of women playing on hot country significantly. The playlist is performing extremely well across our platform, in our country music ecosystem, and against other genre playlists. So I know there's a risk averseness to it, but please know this is here for you to look at, and I hope that it's helpful.
Awesome. I love that. And Rachel, this is one actually for you, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot with this one, but can you give an example of a very successful song on one of your secondary country or country adjacent playlists that curators decided didn't fit hot country?
Oh gosh. Sometimes those are songs that are just not, one of the things we try to do with hot country is make sure that it's something you can listen to in the car with your kids, as I think everyone here is thinking about too. I mean, it is, I think, a tenet of the mainstream country audience, and we'll get a little edgy with it, but sometimes we'll have some viral tracks that we're just not gonna program. There are others that, you know, I think we're trying to program for diversity of sound, right? If all you programmed in 1998 were the most popular songs, you would have ended up with a playlist of just George Strait, Alan Jackson, Tim McGraw, right? Garth Brooks. And you would have missed all of these incredible songs from women. You would have missed all these incredible songs from other artists who maybe didn't have the biggest record of the time. So we're really trying to create more of a holistic listening experience that's not just the most popular songs in a row, right? But yeah.
I mean, they're not all going to work, right? We know that. There's records that we have to work that we think sounds like a hit, and it doesn't.
Oh, and it's
but
a
you
tragedy,
take the chance,
right? I mean,
you know?
I think for us, it's like we might have a great song that we love that just doesn't hit the mark.
Yeah, but you gave it a shot. And as promo reps, we gave it a shot. We're working it. And what we say to radio is, give it a shot.
Any more?
We can do one more here. There's been a lot of talk about genre bending at CRS this year. Most are talking about the crossover between pop and country. With rock being on the rise again as well, do you all see the country rock sound being supported in mainstream country radio like country pop is starting to?
Isn't Jelly Roll played the most on? I mean, I think the rock sound is there. The genre bending, I think, is a good thing, and radio should use its quality, the real-time media, its advantage. So, like, streaming is a sample of one a million times over. It's not a shared experience like radio. So use that. Like, people are experiencing things at the same time, but tell the stories behind the music. Like, make a big deal out of it. If we just play a collection of songs, you're going to miss the opportunity, which is the fact that you have critical mass on a radio station. Well, I hope you have critical mass on a radio station. But you have that opportunity for that shared experience. And that's the difference between us and, say, a streaming platform where it's always just on demand to me, myself, and I, and that's it. But yeah,
it's going to be interesting, you know, with country rock. You know, we have the Red Clay Strays, and when we're going to have new music by the Red Clay, probably later this year, and it's going to be interesting to see how the country radio takes it. You know, again, a band that sells out Red Rocks in 7 minutes, and they sound. I mean, they're a country rock band, you know, but we still worry, you know, how's it going to be?
Because they're left of center.
Yeah,
for
very left.
Great segue into who, obviously, Zach Bryan's a unicorn, right? We're not going to get another Zach Bryan, probably generational artist. Who are you seeing data points on coming up that you're like, this is someone to keep an eye on? You just said Red Clay Strays. We'll just go down the line here. Rachel, is there an artist or two that you're seeing bubbling up in your Indigo or any of those?
Yeah, I mean, we had 4 artists on our all-genre artist to watch list this year. including Tucker Wetmore and Ty Myers and Hudson Westbrook and Zach Top, of course, I don't think would surprise anybody. Carter Faith has done really well for us. And then we're seeing some really early new artists that I love. Scoot Teasley is just adorable and has a great new song that's doing really well.
I want to add on Zach Top as well. My son is off for, whatever it is, winter break, and he heard I was coming down here, and he's like, can I come? And I was like, no, it's a convention. He's like, but Zach Top's going to be down there, and I need to see Zach Top. And then you're telling me he sold out in New York. Yeah, same thing, it's like he's another one.
You got one?
I think it's Ty Myers. My 16-year-old daughter turned me on to him, and never heard of him, and I went Googling. I'm like, oh, please tell me he's not signed. I'm going to push for our A&R, and of course he was signed to records. But 16-year-old kid, this kid's touring everywhere, selling out, and when you have the pop crowd, of 16-year-old girls all loving him already, it's going to be a big thing next year.
Adam?
I think that was one on my list as well. I think you can put him in some arenas today and he would sell out. This current tour he's on, everything sold out in seconds. It's there and it's a real audience.
Fantastic. Brian?
I've got a couple. Hudson Westbrook, definitely seeing big numbers on. Max McNown, Castellows. I love the track with Flatland Cavalry and seeing the kind of ticket sales that those girls are doing across the country. It's pretty cool. Baker Blankenship, another artist we've played, I think he's selling 1,000, 2,000 caps every night now. Sold out tour is what I just saw. And then Cooper Allen, and I pay attention, he moves a lot of bodies.
Fantastic. All right, this is the only thing I'm doing in moderation this week. Thank this panel. We're done.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Chuck.